Welcome everyone. Today I'm speaking to you from Prague. We're staying with our hosts here and we have a wonderful week of lectures and sharing lined up for the city, including a retreat over the weekend where we have 42 people joining from across Europe. And many are coming for different sources of inspiration. For some, it is about finding the purpose of life. For others, it is about reducing stress. For many, it is gaining clarity of thinking. And that has been the subject of the last few sessions. What is the vital role of the intellect? And in the past few sessions, we've spoken about how crucial it is for relationships, for strengthening and substantiating our faith, giving it reason, giving it moderation. We also spoke about how important it is for objectivity. And then, in the previous session, about maintaining inspiration and achievement of success. Now, if this intellect is so valuable, and the more we speak about it, the more we're understanding or gaining an idea of perhaps we need to start investing some time on development of this intellect. But if it's so essential for humanity, why has it been neglected? Why has it been ignored? Why has it been able to fall to the level it is now? And the main reason for this is simply because humanity mistakes intellect for intelligence. Being smart, being brilliant, having a lot of information does not equate to having an intellect. And the substance of this book, The Fall of the Human Intellect by A. Parthasarathi, is explaining this distinction. And if we understand this distinction, we can see what the limits of intelligence are, but also what we need to do to strengthen the intellect, and how we cannot mistake intelligence for doing the job only an intellect can do. Just as how we have in our philosophical Sundays, in these Sunday wisdom sessions, we've become very clear that success does not equal happiness. Monetary, financial well-being, or a good balance statement, does not equate into fulfillment or happiness. We've understood this, even though most of the world says, let me get wealthy and then I'll take care of happiness. As if the one equates into another. It does not. Similarly, intelligence does not equate into intellect. So today, we're going to go through the differences and how intelligence can do some aspects, yes, but aspects that only the intellect can be used, we are going to highlight those as well. So we begin with understanding what is intelligence. How would you define intelligence? Anyone? What is intelligence?
Information.
Information. Great.
Good education.
A good education. Mm-hmm.
I think it's processing things and making connections.
Processing and making connections. So I'm going to come back to that one, Michael. Let's start with intelligence being information, data, knowledge, and this is acquired from external sources. So in order to be intelligent, you need a source from outside that provides this information. So that could be teachers, textbooks, universities. So the first distinction is intelligence comes from an external source. What about intellect? Intellect is built from within. You can't get it from outside. Nobody can develop an intellect for you. Nobody can provide an intellect for you. So even the Vedanta Academy, where I have done a 3-year course and then subsequently another 20 years I've spent on developing the intellect. It is not the place or the education that develops the intellect. It is my own application to the information that's shared in the Vedanta Academy. So intellect has to be built from oneself. Swami Parthasarathy says, intelligence is acquired from external sources, schools and universities, while the intellect is developed by oneself. And this is the first distinction. What is the usefulness of intelligence, of this information? Why do schools and universities place such an accent, such an emphasis on equipping an individual with information?
It gives your intellect more to work with.
It gives your intellect more to work with.
It is a means to make your living.
It is a means to make your living.
Prepares you for external comforts from
external challenges.
Yeah.
Again, so we're going to draw the distinction there. What it can do is that it can provide you with information, and because you have a set of information that other people don't have, people will come to you. Why do we go to a doctor? We go to a doctor because a doctor has knowledge of something that you're going through, an illness, a disease. You don't know how to cure it. A doctor has studied it, matches the symptoms, and then prescribes the treatment. But all the doctor is doing there is using the information, the pattern recognition of the symptoms to what they've learned, and giving you what they've learned. So we use information as a way to transact in life, for a way to earn a living. And look at that. The whole education system is behind that. It's in giving you all this information, and with this information you can trade with others who are ignorant. We go to a plumber, we call a plumber because we don't know how to clear the pipes. We call an electrician because we don't know how to fix the light. We call perhaps a financial advisor to manage our investments because we don't know how to do it. If we have the knowledge of it, we don't need the other person. Intelligence helps you make a living. But you need an intellect to give you the quality of life. What do you do with the wealth? What do you do with the living? Many can earn wealth. It takes an intellect to manage the wealth, maintain it, and grow it. The first part you can do with intelligence. So let's have a look at the distinction between intellect versus intelligence. And what we're trying to display in this distinction is that intelligence is more external. It's not coming from within your personality. It is not an aspect that is using your ability to handle challenge, to process, to understand. It remains at retaining of information, memory. Memory is not intellect. Memory resides in the mind. But to access the memory, to analyze the memory, to access the data, memorize the data, memorizing the data is intelligence, but the accessing and the analysis of it is where the intellect comes in. So have a look at this chart. On the left-hand side, we have intelligence. On the right-hand side, we have intellect. So think about it as external intelligence, internal intellect. On the left-hand side, falling under intelligence, we have knowledge. And with knowledge, you can give beautiful lectures. including this one. But just because I talk about the intellect does not mean I have an intellect that can manage my affairs in life. For that, I need wisdom. And this is where wisdom and intellect are synonymous. To the extent you've applied yourself to the information, to the extent you've digested and reflected on your experiences and made them part of your being, your understanding, then only do you have wisdom. Otherwise, it's just knowledge. It's as good as any computer or on ChatGPT, on Claude, on Gemini. It is not useful unless we've digested and used it. Become it. The one is information, intelligence. But when you use that information to make a change in you from inside, it becomes transformation. Left-hand side, tuition. Right-hand side, intuition. One is sight. Again, it's from external. The other is insight. So one is to read the lines of a book, of a play, of a lecture. You can read the lines, but as William Shakespeare says in Hamlet, they are just words, words, words. It's just words. It has no impact unless you take those words and you make it insight. One is a lecture, the other is you live it. The one is theory, the other is you practice. A reporter went up to Swamiji, the author of the book, and she was trying to provoke Swamiji, and she was asking a few challenging questions, but they weren't challenges for this great thinker. And she asked him, Swami, do you practice what you preach? To which Swamiji answered, I only preach what I practice. It's not one before the other. In philosophy, in Vedanta, you do not know something unless you're living it. You are not wise until it is shown in your actions, in your deeds, in your understanding, in your personality, in your being. There's a famous phrase in the Bhagavad Gita that says, it is not the sermons, it is not the words that communicate, that educate. It is your being, it is the way you walk, it is the way you act, it is the way you interact. It is, and the phrase is, the self unfolds the self. It means whatever is the development of your personality, that is what speaks. So now we go to a few aspects where we're going to analyze and see how the intellect can be used, and the intelligence does not really play a part there. If at all, it can be a support, it can be an aid, but it's the intellect's job to do these few aspects of life. The first aspect is in decision making. In decision making, the ability to analyze the data and decide, depending on the context, the right amount, the right time, the right intensity, that is the job of the intellect. Intelligence is useful because you need the data. So that's where intelligence can be a help. But the intelligence by itself can lead to analysis paralysis. Have you heard of this? You've got so much information, you've got so much data, and unless you know the questions to ask, unless you know the prompts for your own thinking, we don't know what to do with all the data. And this is what we're facing now. Even with all these tools that we have at our disposal with AI, no doubt there are some incredible answers, there's some incredible processes and information that's available. But the challenge is, And what people are missing to really make use of the intelligence is what prompt to ask for. We don't know the right command, the right prompt to ask any of these models, the large language models like ChatGPT or Anthropic. We don't know what to ask them to get what we need for the situation that we're in. And because people have not invested time in developing this intellect, you can see how we would love to outsource our decision making. And we're finding this, especially in the younger generation. Simple questions like what coffee to have. When we go into a coffee shop and we're asking ChatGPT, what coffee should I order? And then a friend, maybe a romantic friend, asks a question. Let me check with ChatGPT. How should I reply? And we're seeing more and more a dependence on just basic human interaction. But it lacks the context, it lacks the assessment of the person, it lacks the situation, it lacks knowledge of how you feel, what you're thinking. And therefore, it cannot give you the best information. Perhaps it could up to a point, based on the information it has available, but you have so much information, far, far more. And we could use it, no doubt, as another source of information, another perspective. But if we want to make quality decisions, it is having a vision of what we want in life, what kind of person we want to be, what kind of values we want to have, and that no external source can give you. We've got to know it for ourselves. In fact, even if somebody does make a good suggestion, it could be a family member, it could be a parent, perhaps on what career to choose, what life partner to consider, it will not work unless we take onus for that decision, unless we process that point of view and make it our own. If it's external and we just follow it, we will not get the inspiration, the accountability, the motivation. Therefore, Albert Einstein says, intellectual growth should commence at birth and cease only at death. It does not matter what tools become available in the future, how advanced AI gets, we will always need intellect because that is what makes us human. The ability to analyze and use information for our benefit. The ability, and as we go later on, to manage our mind, to manage our impulses. But for that, to choose the right action. It comes down to what are the goals that we've decided? What are the values that we would like to imbibe as a person? So this is the first reason. And unless the intellect is strong enough, we don't know what to do with the data, we don't know how to ask the right questions. And having too much data, instead of being of assistance, confuses one. So how do we take the massive data? And I'm saying when I say massive data, even our own experiences, those memories, there is so much of experience, so much of data there that we can draw from. In order to know what to draw, we need clarity, we need context that the intellect provides. So this is the first aspect. We need the intellect for better decision making. Intelligence can help up to a point, but it cannot take the role of the intellect. The second aspect is, whilst intelligence is the data, is the storing of the data, the ability to optimize, use the data, to think originally and build on the data is the job of the intellect. Now, when we look at schools and universities, we find that they're providing the intelligence. So a person goes to med school, medical school, medical college, graduates, but doesn't necessarily become brilliant, writing prescriptions. But another person who also goes to the same medical university, same training, becomes outstanding. How is it? Same education, such stark different results, different careers. Because it is the handful that take the information and make it their own. Find out how to transplant a heart, a kidney, the retina. Incredible discoveries. But that ability to think independent, apart, beyond from the foundation that they have is what makes them outstanding. But if we are just to, and you could be a brilliant student in school, university, but not necessarily be a success in your career or your field. Because what makes a person outstanding is the ability to understand the information they have and go beyond it, to think originally. This is the limitation at the moment of these different models. So at the moment, these different models, and I'm referring to AI again, they match patterns. In a way, that's a form of reasoning, but they have the limitation of the developer, of the programmer. We also have that in some way. We could be limited by our mind. We could be limited by our prejudices, our biases, our emotions. But we also have the ability, because of the intellect, to question, to completely flip a thing and analyze from a different angle, a different perspective. There's a scene in the Count of Monte Cristo. Have you heard of this book or watched the movie? It's a famous French novel by Alexandre Dumas. And in this novel, The Count of Monte Cristo, there's a scene where a sailor who many were envious of is wrongly accused of treason and put in the Chateau d'If. And he's there in prison, rotting away. But he is scraping on the side of the wall, and somebody pushes a brick, a few more bricks, and of course he's startled, and out comes a haggard older man, the Abbé Faria. And the Abbé says, "Oh, this is not the courtyard. I thought I was escaping." He realized that he had miscalculated, and instead of escaping through the outer walls of the prison, he's ended up in the next cell. But it is such a relief to interact. They were in solitary confinement, to interact with each other. And the Abbé asks Dantes, the name of the sailor, he says, "Will you help me escape?" And Dante says, "How long will it take?" He said, "About 7-9 years. 7-9 years of digging?" "No." He said, "I'll teach you what I know." And Dante says, "Will you teach me to read and write?" He says, "Yes." And there's a conversation that goes something like this. And this is from the book. Dante says, "You must teach me a small part of what you know." And the Abbé says, "Human knowledge is confined within very narrow limits. Now, it will scarcely require 2 years for me to communicate to you the stock of learning I possess." And Dantes asks, "Do you really believe I can acquire all these things in so short a time?" And the Abbé says, "Not their applications, certainly, but their principles you may. To learn is not to know. There are the learners and the learned. Memory makes the one, philosophy makes the other. Look at the choice of words. Memory makes the one. Intelligence. Philosophy makes the other. Intellect. And then he continues. He says, Dante's asked, but cannot one learn philosophy? Philosophy cannot be taught. It is the application of the sciences to truth. Philosophy is reducible to no rules by which it can be learned. It is the amalgamation of all the sciences, the golden cloud which bears the soul to heaven. Alexander Dumas, a masterpiece. And what he's saying here is exactly the same thing. We can learn the principles, but to understand it, to make it our own, and to truly benefit from it is the role of the intellect. There is a particular vital air. It's called Udana Shakti. And a vital air is an aspect that we need for functioning, and it lies between our mind and the body. So this is where other vital airs such as inhalation, exhalation, the ability to absorb nutrients, to excrete, reproduction, all these vital airs, these inner functions that are so useful for life, lie in this sheath or subtle layer of our personality. One of the vital airs is called Udana Shakti. Udana means the ability to absorb new information, thoughts, data. And this Udana Shakti is strongest when we are babies. Constantly absorbing. A baby is just a sponge. And it is said that within the first 2 years of life, the amount of information that a baby absorbs is as much as we absorb in the rest of our life, because the taking in color, sound, all the different stimuli. Now, we are getting this information. We're acquiring additional information through school, university, through our life's experiences, through our travels, through our reading. That information remains as gold on a mule's back. It's precious, it's valuable. But we cannot use it unless we process it, unless we understand it. Alvin Toffler says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So it is evolving. Reading and writing is not enough. This is an education. It makes us intelligent. But for us to be intellectual, it needs to take the information, learn it, unlearn it, and relearn it. And then that's when we benefit from it. And so the first aspect, and this is the second use of the intellect, is to understand the information first of all. Have I processed it? And unless we are putting some reflection time into our day, we do not learn from our experiences, we do not learn from the information, from the data, including the Sunday Wisdom session. This once a week, unless we keep an additional time in the week to process and reflect on the knowledge, it just evaporates. In fact, if somebody asks you next week, what was the topic in last Sunday Wisdom session? We won't remember it. Evaporated. But if we reflect on it, we get the one idea, the one theme that we need to take away, we use it. There's a saying by Pablo Picasso. He says, learn the rules like a pro, so you can break them as an artist. Learn the rules like a pro. So We need to learn, if you're a musician, you need to learn the foundation of music. You need to learn the notes. If you're an artist, you need to learn all the structures, the forms of art. But once you know that, then you can break it. Now, if you haven't learned that, and this is where the value of intelligence comes in. If we haven't learned it, then how do we optimize it? How do we take it to a next level? So, you might be an original thinker. And you're thinking originally, you're not relying on other people, and congratulations. What do you invent? The table. The table has been there for a long time. Oh, then you say, okay, let me think originally, come up with a new invention. The car. The car has been there for a long time. So, to say intelligence is useless is incorrect. We need intelligence. So we should not neglect it, we should not deny it, but use it as a base only. And then from there, understand the principles and play with it. Explore it. And this is what Picasso means. First, we got to learn the foundations, learn the structures, learn the forms, and then you can break it. But if you are playing at a different pitch, if you do not have discipline, you cannot just call that creativity. This is me, artist, what? Just doing whatever's on the top of your mind? No form, no skill. Where is the creativity? Creativity is doing something new. Being impulsive has been there from time immemorial. That is not new. But the ability to be a genius is to take those forms and invent on them, improve them, relook at them. So the third aspect of having an intellect is to think originally. So first aspect, we said we need intellect for decision making. Second aspect, we need intellect to understand the information that we've received and memorized. Third part is we need intellect to think beyond the information, to think originally. So what would you suggest, anybody, at this stage, we're halfway through, what would you suggest to a person who wants to build the intellect, who wants to be an outstanding creator, innovator? Where do they go? What should they do?
To be open.
To be open, yes.
Analyze the information you have.
Analyze the information.
Wisely to know.
Analyze the information.
Do the Vedanta online course.
Perfect. I was hoping for that. Do the e-learning course. Great. Now that is very useful from a life perspective, definitely. And when we talk about it in general, because it could be for engineering, it could be for art, it could be for music, is that when we learn something, the pace of learning or the pace of acquiring information should be at a rate that we can digest it. So if we're not taking the time to digest and reflect and make that information our own, that information is useless. It's gold bars on a mule's back is the saying, because the mule does not know how to use the gold. The gold is valuable, but to who? The data, the education is valuable, but in what proportion? To who? Can that individual take the time to process it? Now, in some educational institutions, and I've spoken to a lot in India, some of them have 10 to 12 hours of academic sessions. And also on Saturday. Where is the time to process that amount of information? So they're getting the best speakers, they are hearing case studies, wonderful information, but no time for processing. So it's a sheer bombardment of information, most of which the personality cannot process, absorb. Some you remember, most of it wasted. So the idea is here, let us filter, take in the information to the extent we can absorb and live by it. In the Vedanta Academy, you will find there are only 2 academic sessions in the day. And the rest of the time, we have different activities, but the key parts of the day are given for reflection, because you can take time to not just learn philosophy, learn about life, but to actually absorb and live it. That's the idea. So what we are looking at doing is taking up information in a liberal way, to become it, not to make a living from it, not to make a career, not to memorize it for the sake of repeating it to a client, a customer, a patient, an exam, but to live it. We had a gentleman, no academic qualification whatsoever, just finished school, but he was not an electrical engineer, but he was liberally educated. In the sense, he just read for his amusement as a hobby. He read about everything electrical. But his mind was like that. So he learned the principles, so it was without any formal academic qualification. He's now an electrical consultant for different companies. But when he was in the academy, we had an imported oven. And this oven from Italy packed up. And we called the consultants, we called the people from Italy, they sent an engineer, they sent a local engineer. Nobody could fix the oven. And can you imagine, this beautiful oven that did serve us for many years was lying in the maintenance yard. And our electrical engineer, he went up, nobody told him to do anything. He had a little bit of extra time during the day, and during karma time, where it's service time, he went and he was fiddling around with the oven. He bought a few parts. Some were saying if you replace a particular part of the oven, you can get it working again, but that was almost the same cost as a new oven. Within 3 weeks, he fixed it. Total cost for it, 3,000 rupees. For this imported oven. That oven is still working up to today. Same guy. The students were traveling by train from Pune to Delhi. And at about 10 p.m., somewhere between Pune and Delhi, it's quite a long travel, the train stopped. So this is unusual, train's not supposed to stop here. And he went to go and investigate, naturally. He gets off the train, all of us are sitting there like normal passengers do, everybody's sitting. He gets off to go and see what happened. And he goes and he finds out what has happened is that there was an accident and the train went over an animal crossing the rails. And there was the train had gone off the rails slightly. And this was the delay. They were waiting for another carriage, compartment to come, etc. And this is what was going on. And imagine, he's 22 years old. He's telling the driver, let's try something. The driver said, okay also. He said, let's go a little bit ahead. He gets one of the engineers there, he says, let's unlink this. And then we'll see what we can do with the part that is causing the train to lift a bit, and then move it back and link it. And can you imagine? They listened to him because it made sense, and the train got up and moving in 20 minutes. Incredible. Firstly, would any of us get off the train? We would just say, oh my goodness, this train, I should never have gone by train, I should have gone by plane. But look at the intellect. What is the problem? Maybe I can solve it. Incredible. So this is the idea of thinking originally. The fourth one is, and this is where we come down to the real crux of why we use the intellect, why the intellect is essential. You could be brilliant, you could have researched and have the most information on a subject, but that does not mean you have the ability to control your mind even in that subject. In the book, The Fall of the Human Intellect, Swamiji, the author, gives an example where he has an appointment with one of the top 3 scientists in the US. And his wife made the appointment because she's a student, and she's introducing Swamiji and the scientist. Says, Swamiji, this is my husband, he's a great scientist. And the man is nodding his head. And Swamiji is polite, says, oh, pleasure to meet you. And all the formalities and the polite things have been said. They sit down, and the next thing the lady says is, please put some sense into my husband. And Swamiji is shocked because this is one of the most intelligent people on the planet. One of the top 3 scientists, has contributed, has so many patents to his name. And the man is nodding his head. My wife is right. My wife is right. And the problem is, even though he's a top scientist, he cannot control his desire for alcohol. His liver is shot. He does not know how to react if something negative happens. A cup and saucer might fall and break, and he's thinking about it for 2 weeks. Why did it happen? Oh, it was such a jerk to my personality. He's thinking about it. He does not know how to control his temper. So look, he has all the intelligence, but does not have the ability to control the desire for alcohol, to control temper, to control a negative incident happening, does not know how to handle it. We need an intellect to control the mind. But even in a subject, if you do not reflect on it, if you do not internalize and absorb it, you might have a lot of information on that subject and just have it lie on that superficial understanding. We know a cardiologist, top cardiologist, telling the patients, one after the other, stop your smoking. Stop, cut down on the drinking, reduce the stress. And this cardiologist is a chain smoker. Between patients, having a quick puff, opens the windows, airs out the room, calls the next patient. Now, does he know what the nicotine is doing to the heart? Of course he does. He's written journals on it. But he does not have the intellect strong enough to control the mind. And this is why when we see outstanding personalities where they're brilliant, but they make decisions that derail their whole career. It could be presidents, it could be scientists, it could be doctors, business people. They have all the information. And yet, the one decision where the desire is too strong, mind takes over. You say, how can that person do that? Mind over intellect. It comes down to the model that we've been studying all these weeks and years. If the intellect is not strong enough to control the mind, we are helpless victims to our mind. Notwithstanding all the information that the intellect might have, all the intelligence that a person might have, rendered useless. There was an investment specialist. And this investment specialist came up with a software to ensure people make prudent, rational strategies. Okay? And whenever they want to make an investment that goes beyond their portfolio, to allocate too much in a particular stock or that ruins the right allocation that they've devised, it would send a prompt and stop the transaction. So it was a wonderful discipline tool to ensure that you are investing according to your long-term goals. Never too excessive, never too risky. But the only person who could override the program was himself. When I met him a few years later, he asked me, Sudhakar, I want to see you. Can I talk to you? I said, yes, sure. And I asked him, how's the investment business going? And he said, terrible. I said, what happened? He said, no, I made a bad investment. I said, it's not possible. You've got the software there to make sure it's not risky, etc. He said, no, I overrode it. He said, it looked too good to be true. I overrode the system. He did it for others, but he couldn't control the temptation of his own mind. So we need the intellect to manage the mind. We need the intellect to keep to those values. Rabindranath Tagore, he says the world is full of sound scholars, but not sound men. When we look at education today, schools often boast, what? We are sending the kids to the top universities. They got placements in companies, in universities. Does any school say, we have created sound human beings? Happy human beings? Beautiful contributors to society? There is no measure of that. The last two. We need the intellect to handle challenges. Intelligence alone, you can analyze, but the ability to rise to your own challenge, and we've seen this, how the greatest of thinkers, CEOs, scientists, they're outstanding maybe in their particular field, but as soon as something comes to the home front, a family member is not well, hospitalized, ill, passes away, overwhelmed, completely shuts down. You have divorce lawyers, marriage counselors, who have all this information about life and about relating and have seen what is the worst thing that can happen in divorce, also have all the ability about how to reconcile people. And you ask the marriage counselor, look, we're taking your advice, but how's it going with you? No, I'm twice divorced. So wait, hold on, but you're trying to keep us together? He said, yes, because I'm experienced. No, this is not a good sign. Are you able to live by your values? Are you able to live by your knowledge? Are you able to handle a challenge when it comes to you? And for that, you need to think logically, you need to be in control of your emotions, you need to be structured. It doesn't matter the amount of experiences you've had. And that's why in William Shakespeare's play Othello is a commander in the army, and he picks as his deputy, not his experienced lieutenant Iago, he picks Cassio, a mathematician. Why did he pick a mathematician over somebody who's an experienced general? For his thinking, for his ability to be objective, to handle a crisis, to think structured. And the last aspect that a human being needs an intellect for. We need an intellect to delve into our personality and take us to the extreme most terrestrial point and then leave it there. Cross over to self-realization. Again, there is so much of information, there is so much of knowledge, there's so much intelligence on the spiritual field. You have incredible, learned people. But are they professors or are they philosophers? Do they live the knowledge or do they merely lecture on the subject? In order to be self-realized, to be enlightened, is to take that information or whatever life throws at us, to analyze it and make it our own. Then we see, then we get the insight. But all the sight, all the tuition, all the Vedas, scriptures, and all these beautiful texts that are out there, all, from all the great traditions, are of no avail unless we are able to lecture to ourselves, unless we are able to take those thoughts and make our own. You've got incredible saints and sages who did not know how to read and write, who never went through any formal education. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, one of the great saints, and his institution is known around the world. He was not a man of letters. And yet, when you hear him speak, such wisdom speaks to your soul. His words penetrate. Ramana Maharishi never finished his education. Yet, he would contend and answer the questions of the greatest theologists. Again, intelligence may be useful. It can help others. It can be presented in a particular way. So if a person takes intelligence and uses it for self-realization, for enlightenment, what an aid. So we see people like Adi Shankaracharya, the author of this book, Swami Parthasarathi, with such a high level of academic intelligence, of studying Western and Eastern philosophy, and then being able to present it, you can use it for your own growth, for your own enlightenment. Lord Buddha, he had been well versed in all the traditions, all the scriptures of the time, but he didn't allow it to be theoretical. He used it for his own journey within, questioning that fundamental question of who am I? What is the real part of my personality? And he found it. Therefore, thinking is an art, a skill, a technique. It needs to be learnt and practiced, just as we would to play a musical instrument or fly an aircraft. We've got to invest time in building this intellect, not just on equipping ourselves with information. We gave a lecture 2 days ago at a leadership school in Bratislava, Slovakia. And the students afterwards, they came up and they said, "We've never heard anything like this. And how is it not taught? We don't even know how to manage our minds. We don't even know the nature of our minds to manage it." This is it. We've taken thinking for granted. So here is a summary of today's points. Intelligence is not intellect. So I could have saved you the 1 hour and just told you that one line, which is the title. Intelligence is not intellect. Why? Because you need intellect for the quality of your decision making. Number one. Number two, we need the intellect to understand the information, to make it our own. 3, to think originally. So one is we receive the information, we think out of the box. To think original and be outstanding in a particular field. The 4th, to manage the mind's desires. 5th, to handle the challenges that come forward in life and overcome them. And the last one, to reach self-realization. Intelligence can be helpful in life, but there is no cause and effect relationship. Intelligence does not develop the intellect. It is your own application to some intelligence, yes, but even just thinking within yourself that will develop the intellect. And now we're open to questions.
Question 1. Can the intellect also be a function of our vasanas? Are some people born with a stronger intellect than most others?
Yes, intellect is a function of our vasanas. So depending on the quality of your vasanas, the quality of your intellect. And it is something that is carried forward. So whatever your vasanas are, that is the kind of intellect that's going to express when the intellect expresses at the age of 8, 10 years old. And that is why some have more developed intellects than others. Now what we do with the intellect that we have in this lifetime is really up to our individual efforts. but it has been built from our past.
Question 2. What does intelligence quotient, IQ, stand for? As IQ testing instruments stand today, are they measuring intelligence or intellect as defined in Vedanta? Is there any overlap of IQ and intellect?
I think there is an overlap. Predominantly, IQ tests check your ability to match patterns. So that's the intelligence part. But there is also an aspect to problem solve, and that requires processing of information that you've received and maybe not learned, but you've gone past it. So that is the part that would test your intellect, your ability to think independent of what you know and come to conclusions. So I think IQ testing, and I haven't done one in a while, does have some aspect of intellect, but it's predominantly testing intelligence.
The next question. Is there a semantic problem? Intelligence in the military sense is knowledge, i.e. data, but in the academic sense, intelligence is the processing power of the student. Is intellect therefore a synonym for academic intelligence? Define the difference, if not.
It is semantics. So it depends how we are using these words, and in different contexts, in different cultures, we use these words differently. So in some contexts, they use mind to mean the intellect. So all we need to do is not get too focused on the words. There is an aspect when we're talking about knowledge and data, we're just calling that intelligence. So external information is intelligence. So don't get too hooked on the definition as per your particular language. Here we're using it in a particular context. So external information is intelligence, that inherent ability to process and analyze the information is intellect. Also the second part, the ability to control emotions, impulses, desires and attachments, that capacity, capability is the intellect. So you could give it different words. You can call it, this is A and this ability is B. For common understanding purposes, we're using today intelligence to mean external information, intellect to mean the ability to think originally, the ability to process, understand, the ability to manage the mind.
The next question. How do we train for emotional intelligence?
Excellent. Emotional intelligence is using the information of emotions. So often when we become or start moving towards being intelligent, we don't see emotions as information, but emotions has powerful data. And if we are able to use and take in that data for context, for understanding, for human interaction, empathy, situational reading, that can be valuable information for the intellect to process and then make a decision. So an intellect that takes in all factors and does not or ignores the emotional aspect is missing some of the picture, a crucial part of the picture, and will not come to the right decision because the mind has useful information. It has emotion and feeling, which is powerful data. Why do you feel negative about the situation? That is worth putting into your criteria for thinking. So emotional intelligence would be somebody who reads emotion, takes in emotion into account, and then responds. So we could call in this context emotional intelligence the data of emotions, And emotional intellect is a true intellect that analyzes that data, those emotions, and responds accordingly.
We'll take up the last question. The intellect seems to have two roles. One is being able to discern and discriminate. The other is to control the mind and ensure we act according to obligation. It seems reflection can help with the first, but how do we work on the second?
So intellect can control the mind when we reflect, because in a particular situation where our mind has overwhelmed us, we don't know how to react in that situation. A person caught us off guard and we were not ready for that situation, so we reacted, we lost our temper, and depending on the quality of your intellect, you might think nothing was wrong. I just reacted. But later on, when the intellect becomes available, you think, my goodness, I was so harsh. I was unduly harsh. And why did I get upset? It's not good to get upset like that. What kind of example am I setting? What's the kind of person I want to be? And also, that person could have retaliated. This is not a good idea. So, reflection is, how can I do it differently? Why did I get angry? Are there methods not to get angry in those situations? What is my desire that got obstructed in the first place for me to express like that? This is all reflection. So reflection is as vital in understanding as it is in understanding our mind, in having the conversation with the mind and figuring out how to relate to the mind. And that's what I mean by reflecting on our past experiences, our past interactions with the mind, and figuring out the mind as a personality that we assess and figure out what is the right way to contact the mind to get the best cooperation. It's crucial. The way to develop the intellect, and we've spoken about it. 1, question everything. As soon as you start questioning, you've activated conscious thought. 2nd, don't take anything for granted. Try and understand the base principles of it. Why do I do that? Why don't I do that? Why does most of the world do that? What is this principle based on? Find the base principles underlying it. And the 3rd is, we don't have to go and ignore all the intelligence that there is about life out there. There is a structured philosophy, a wisdom of life called Vedanta, presented by a person who spent 65 years in the field, Swami Parthasarathi. We've got the course of learning with the books, with the e-learning, and with our Sunday wisdom sessions as well, where we can go deeper and deeper with the subject. All we need to do is take in some information and ensure we make the time to reflect on it and keep moving. Intellect is crucial. Perhaps educational institutions need to figure out the balance. Now it is so much intelligence, no intellect. Let's not remove the intelligence, but side by side build the intellect. So next week, there is no live session. We will screen a recording. We have the Prague retreat next Sunday. But the following Sunday, we will speak about refining the educational system. So that might be of interest to many of you. I know some of you are in the educational field, so that should be interesting. Thank you, everybody.